All right. So Blade Runner. So I want to say, no, this wasn't in your initial list of things that maybe like years ago, Twinkie, when we first sort of reconnected through the podcast and we were talking about having you on more in the future, like there's, or even before I think you came on, we're like, these are things I'd love to talk about. It's like women in film, certain things we've gotten to. The professional was Blade Runner wasn't out yet, right? So
I'm
maybe it
not
wouldn't have been on that
sure.
list. The 2049.
Right. I don't think so.
I definitely know though. It might even be the book that you're about to talk about that something did bring it up one of the times you were on the podcast because I definitely knew like when I got 2049 I bought it on Blu-ray and I remember texting you and I got the idea of like you should just get that because it's going to be gorgeous and you're going to like it as a film no matter what and I got most of that inspired by you talking about it on here so I know it definitely has come up somewhere in all of those times that you've been on.
Yeah, and I Blade Runner is probably not something that I like. It grew on me. I remember watching it the first time, and like a lot of people who watched it for the first time in the theater, they were expecting Harrison Ford of Star Wars, and they were expecting that sort of movie, and they got Aliens, Ridley Scott and kind of a noir film, and it was challenging to a lot of people, and the movie obviously did not do well. In the book, they talk about how they were wrestling with when to release it because there was a small movie coming out, a kids movie that was coming out that same summer, and they're like, well, we'll release it like 4 weeks after E.T. because E.T. will be done by then, and they got their lunch eaten. E.T. smoked them for the entire summer. And they completely underestimated Spielberg and his little kid movie. And so, they talk about how they definitely tried to make it a summer movie and sold it as a summer movie. And it's not a traditional summer movie, right? It's just not going to, it's not going to be that. Ridley Scott never made it that way from the beginning. The book I've read twice, and it's a tough read.
Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? It's
right.
Philip K. Dick, right? So somehow I know both of those things, but I've never ever read it.
It's a very challenging read. I find a lot of his stuff really challenging to read.
It is. I would recommend. Yeah, I would really recommend trying to find some of his stuff on audio because I find that it's a little easier to consume because then that cadence that you're talking about, that author, the narrator gives it to you. So then it's just like, it works for me when I listen to it. I actually did not, that was so long ago, I could not tell you much about it, but I know I did listen to it.
Well, I mean, a lot of his stuff has been made, obviously been made into movies with A Scanner Darkly and Minority Report and The Adjustment Bureau. And,
I think he's like the most adapted sci-fi author. Like
I could definitely
Hollywood film,
see that, to varying levels of success, but, certainly he's visionary in a lot of ways. Kind of seeing the future probably before it really was there. I mean, he used a lot of LSD and so on. So that
he
helps.
also believed we were living in a simulation. There's a really viral video where he holds a press conference to announce that we are living in a simulation. So
recently this would have been or a long time ago.
I think in the 70s.
Oh wow.
Or 80s. I'll have to see if I can dredge that up, and I will share that with you too. It's very interesting to listen to for sure. But I don't know if it's like on a press junket for a book, or what, or if, love you too, honey, or if it's a panel or something. But he takes that opportunity to like have this long like, here's my hypothesis. This is why I think I'm right. None of us are actually here. We're all in a simulation. It's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's interesting because there's like authors that are kind of, I don't know, that like William Gibson, right, who's kind of the somewhat founder of the cyberpunk genre, talks about how when he saw Blade Runner, he just said, how did they see into my brain and understand about the book that I just wrote? Because he had written his kind of magnum opus,
Necromancer.
It's a play on that.
Something like that.
I'm losing it right now. But anyway, he had written it before that movie came out, but it was released after Blade Runner.
Oh, yeah.
Remember him saying in an interview, like, people are going to think that I saw Blade Runner and then wrote this book because of the themes, kind of this urbanism and how technology and humanity, the lines are blurred, just a lot of stuff like that. Neuromancer.
Yep, that was it. Yeah,
Neuromancer. Yeah. So and reading this book, Future Noir, people talk about it like, either I didn't like it when it came out, but it grew on me, and obviously there's been like 5 different editions of the movie that Ridley has tried to do to quote unquote make it his vision. And, I don't know how much that really helps it. I've watched the final cut in preparation for this, and I've watched the original cut a couple times, and, you can kind of get lost in the minutia with some of that, but to just enjoy the movie as it was made and just how it feels, right? This noir setting in the future is so interesting and a great approach.
Yeah, I like that. There's the big thing about the voiceover, but just from a really base level, just, is it fun? Is it enjoyable? Blah, blah, blah. It's, it plays up the sort of, he's like a noir. It's a neo-noir. It's like a modern noir. And so it harkens back to the like Raymond Chandler type stuff with like Humphrey Bogart talking about, narrating it in the same way that Harrison Ford does. So I sort of liked that. I rewatched the trailer for, because I didn't get all the way through the first Blade Runner. I started to rewatch it recently in the last few days and kind of only made it halfway through. So I'll refresh my memory today by watching the trailer. And I found like a 3-minute trailer that was from the time, and it's kind of narrated in that way by the trailer itself by Harrison Ford. Only I didn't even recognize his voice because it was not quite as deep as it used to be. It was only like halfway through that trailer. I was like, oh, this is Harrison Ford doing the narration thing. I think it was specific to the trailer. It's been a long time since I saw that version of the movie. Anyway, I liked that. There's a lot to explain to get you into the world. And so my memory of it was very functional, but also kind of contributed to that vibe of him being a detective, and help orienting you to the kind of story you were watching. I don't know. I like that. And so I think I've seen a few versions over the years. I don't remember the definite distinctions. I know the ending is a big part of it and the voiceover, but they all work to me. Do you have a favorite of the versions, Twinkie? Or are you not?
I guess I lean to the final cut only because, Ridley has just talked about how, he was able to kind of go in and do some of the stuff that he wanted to do. I don't have a strong opinion. I mean, some people just absolutely hate the voiceover. I don't like with you, I understand its impact. I know Harrison Ford doesn't like it, not because he doesn't like the voiceover, but because they basically, told him he had to go do it when he hadn't signed anything to do it or was told he wasn't going to have to do it. And so it's more just kind of Harrison Ford kind of Harrison Fording it a little bit, just being kind of grumpy that, it didn't fit his vision, and I mean, not like any other movie, I'm sure. I've never been on a movie set, but especially when you have someone like Ridley Scott, who had come off a lot of success. He's used to filming fast in the industry of commercials. And now he's given this amazing backlot set, and they're up against, I think it was an actor's strike or a writer's strike or something, as they're trying to get everything done. And there was some sort of strike that was coming up towards the end of the filming. And then he kind of made some mistakes where he talked to a newspaper, I think in his in the UK where he's from, and said he preferred UK crews to US crews. Well, of course, his isn't social media, but somebody got their hands on a copy of the paper and spread that around. And I think they end up calling it like Blood Runner or something, because of like how intense he was. And,
because he's really exacting, as I understood it. Like, and he can kind of do anyone's job. That was the other thing I was getting. He was like, he could do anybody's job in that crew. And because
he's used
of that,
running the camera, right? Because as a director in the UK, you don't have a cinematographer necessarily at that time. You were everything, especially at his level when he's doing all these commercials. And so now he's got a cinematographer who just did a fucking incredible job. But, he's just not used to that. He's not used to communicating through those different lines of communication of, letting things trickle down through the ranks and letting things work back up, right? He's like, we got to do this. We got to get it done. And they're filming at night in the rain and smoke. And, just after 6 weeks of that, I think people were just over it. The actors are over it. The crew's over it. Scott's over it. I think
too, because he's just so new. I'm sure all of us have had times where we have a vision in our head that we have to try to communicate to some other person or group of people to help achieve that vision. And that can be super challenging to paint that picture in your head. And I know he is a visionary person, and I'll cite the 6 hour long documentary that's with Prometheus. And there's a scene where they're talking about him doing his storyboards, and he'd be like, it's not him that says this, it's somebody that was working with him on the storyboards. And they'd go, "Give me my small pen." And he would, to just try to express the scale, he'd draw a little tiny stick figure in this frame that would have a landscape in it. But he would draw this little stick figure to show that's how big this needs to look. If there was a person, that's how small they would be. And I'm all of that to say, with all of these new things and how horrendous it was, the amount of scale he's able to communicate on that frame is astounding.
And I think not until the final cut where they went in and did some work on Joanna Cassidy's Zora character, where they put her face on the stunt woman when she's going through the glass. So if you watch the original one, it is definitely not her. It's a shot of her face. You could tell it's not her. And so in the final cut, they go do but there's no CGI in the original.
Right. It's all optical and matte paintings.
And then they go into it in this, and then in some of the commentaries, if you've listened to those, just the pure amount of frantic work every single day to make a movie come together like that. I don't know why anybody wants to make movies. You've really got to be passionate. And I know it's the same today. It's just, it's just in a different way. And it makes me appreciate it more, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, is because I like movies. I love movies, but I would never want to make one.
Yeah.
I love video games, and it's the same thing. It's soul-crushing, grinding march to death on some of those projects, and you're just
yeah.
I'm glad somebody's passionate about it.
Do you think that's just where he was in his career, though? I mean, he had Alien under his belt.
His sets aren't like that now. Yeah.
Yeah. He kind of plays by his own tune now, right? Because he's earned that. But but I think to get to that point, you're right. It is it takes 150% passion,
Yeah. Well, and just dealing with personalities on the set, you have really well-known people. I mean, Daryl Hannah, of course, was a big name at the time. Sean Young had made a name for herself coming into this. And of course, Harrison was, they joke in one of the one of the things about how it's almost funny to watch Harrison Ford in this now, because Harrison Ford cost as much as this movie was to make, to get Harrison Ford as an actor on a movie nowadays would just be, he's probably not commanding, of course, what he used to, but at his height, he was 20 million a picture probably,
sure.
back in that, but, and I mean, so there's so many different ways to go. I talk about any angle of it that you guys are interested in, but like the person that I love watching in this movie the most is definitely Rutger Hauer.
Yeah.
His just incredible. Just incredible. I mean, the heart and soul that he gives to a machine, frankly. And I don't know, the scene with Joe Turkel's character, Eldon Tyrell, and there's just, I can go on and on about all of the things that I love. And it's interesting hearing about, so for example, in the scene where Roy Beatty meets Eldon Tyrell, they were going to have that scene be, you find out that that's not actually Eldon Tyrell, that's another bot. And they go into this like cryogenic freeze area, another set. And Eldon Tyrell is just like frozen. And he's going to be resurrected when the technology catches up, or a certain time, I forget, but they ran out of money. And so they're like, nope, you're Eldon Tyrell now. And just reshot it or re-edited it to where, that's clear to the audience. And that's in future noir.
Yeah, no, that scene is so powerful, and just, I really think that Rutger Hauer carries that movie, in my opinion. It just is a stellar performance from him. I think that one thing that it was in prep for this show, actually, that I realized about these films is, like, because you call them bots, and I always got hung up on the book is called "Do Androids Sleep or Dream of Electric Sheep?" Jeez. And I always pictured like the Terminator, right? But they're not. It's not that. They are indistinguishable from human beings, really. You have to get down to that. And that's the point of, like, in the second one, they're like zooming in on a bone, and there's a serial number buried deep down microscopically on that bone. But
I know I didn't catch a lot of the stuff. I remember watching it the first time and being confused a little bit, or, it's obviously a very dark movie.
Yeah.
I don't think it was the first time I saw breasts in a movie, but it was probably like one of the first time I saw breasts in a movie.
Nice.
They were bejeweled then, right?
Yeah, they were bejeweled.
Yeah.
Even more delightful than they already are.
Yeah.
But so I just remember like a scattershot of things. But then, of course, like, it's just one of those movies you can watch again and then like, oh yeah, they only have a 4-year lifespan. And what about if you found out? What if you knew right now, that your life was going to end in 2 years? Not just, you're actually a human being and you just found out your life was going to end in 2 years. Like, that would completely change how you lived your life.
Yeah.
Completely. I mean, it would change how I live my life. So let alone if you then find out that, and the fact that you're not a human, and I just feel like when I know it and I watch the movie then at that level, I find those performances by Hauer and Brian James and Joanna Cassidy, some of those other characters to be even better and really add to the landscape and the urban district, just mega city feeling. And then of course 2049 throws in all this extensive climate change, just pile on the pain.
It's all shit.
It's all shit.
Of course, you saw the Coke billboard, right? The Coke billboard.
Yeah,
that was amazing.
I just thought it was a very excellent movie. And of course you saw Coke. There was a Coke billboard. I spotted that.
Really?
In the movie.
I
Yeah.
can't see that.
Above the drugstore. That was amazing. So Coke has been and always will be a part of everyone's life.
The Coke billboard was amazing.
That's great. You can't get much better. Coke will always be there. All right, enough about the Coke.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a callback to Palmer's picks.
Yeah.
Let me ask a question that I think really it helps illustrate where like your response I feel like to the series. Is Deckard a replicant or not?
Yeah.
What
So
do you think?
to everybody else who will end up listening to this, this is obviously the question. And the ongoing joke to this question is that when Ridley Scott visited the 2049 set in where it was filming in Eastern Europe somewhere, I kind of forget where, but of course the 2049 is by one of my favorite directors, Denis Villeneuve, who's doing Dune coming up, but a great cast all around. That's a whole nother, it's just a great movie. But when Ridley Scott shows up, him and Harrison Ford get right into it. Just get
about
right
whether or
into
not,
it about whether he's a replicant or not. Harrison's trying to convince him that he's not, and Ridley is 100% convincing him that he is. And it's been 30 years since they've done this, and they just go right at each other in intense, but I think obviously they're having fun with each other to some degree.
Sure.
And so I like the fact that the film does just enough because Ridley Scott is on record saying that he wants Deckard to be a replicant, and that's why he films for the other movies the scene with the unicorn, so that when whatever Edward James Olmos's character's name, I forgot right now, but
I can't remember the name either.
He leaves him the little unicorn. You have to ask the question, well, how does he know that
Harrison Ford daydreams of
Rick
unicorns?
Deckard has these dreams about unicorns?
Unless they were implanted. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so ask that question.
And this, in my research for this is it took up till my research for this to really understand the small, like that. This is a very minute nuance that has gigantic implications, because so the replicants that the whole movie, like the MacGuffins that are being pursued through the movie, are a certain type of replicant that will die after 4 years because they have no emotion or no, they're only for what their purpose is. And because of that, they are driven by their emotions. And that's the test that they take is specifically designed to make them have an outburst. And so the theory is that Tyrell his breakthrough was, if I implant memories and give them a past, that's what makes them a civilized version of a replicant that is in control of its emotions and able to, well, in his opinion, pass that same assessment. But
which is exemplified by Rachel in the original
exactly.
Blade Runner, who is this kind of next generation replicant.
And has no idea she is a replicant until he tells her that
his memory. He tells her her memories. Tells Rachel her memories. Deckard does.
Yeah. And so that kind of throws her entire reality in a loop. And that scene that is added with the unicorn at the end, the origami unicorn, is them running off into the sunset of the final cut of the film.
Yeah. So in the final cut, it removes the happy ending, if you will, and they just kind of disappear into the elevator.
Oh yeah.
And that's it. But yeah, in the original cut, they have this like thing where they run off, famously using outtakes, I think, from The Shining or something like that.
That's right, in the car, and following them through
there's footage of them, something from The Shining. I briefly saw that.
I remember hearing about that. Yeah.
But yeah, it is interesting question. I like to I land on Harrison's side on this. I like to believe that he's not a replicant, only because I think that what I like about Rick Deckard is that Rick Deckard is not anything special. In one of the commentaries I read, kind of talk about how Rick Deckard is actually less than spectacular in many ways. In fact, he only kills 2 of the replicants, and it's the 2 women who he shoots in the back.
Yeah.
And Brian James's character, who's going to kill him, wake up, it's time to die. That great line. Of course, Rachel kills him. And so, he's not spectacular. He's, it's kind of the Indiana Jones thing where he's a kind of supposed to kind of be retired and he's over it. He's done. He's kind of blundering about and he's just not good at a lot of things.
Yeah.
He just kind of finds ways to get out of it. Obviously the one romance scene, the one kind of emotional scene where he's kind of demanding of Rachel's character for intimacy rather than making any effort to create it. And I just think it not contradicts, but it's kind of opposed a little bit to the perfect replicant that they're trying to create. He's very human in so many different ways. And I like that contrast is probably the word I was looking for.
That's a good point.
Between that and you look at Rachel, who, is, just stunning, beautiful.
Yeah. And super composed and controlled. Even if we get into like the Gosling one too, he's very staid and very reserved. Yeah, that's a great. And it's interesting because this whole idea of them being the next 6, right, are the really fiery ones. And if anything, he would be maybe a little bit more like that because of his more kind of impulsive nature or just like, he's just not, he doesn't have the perfection, the whole more human than human thing. But he seems like so mundanely human.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, to say he's even more so in the book. I haven't read it in a while, but they talk about it in those commentaries that we listen to, how in the book, he's like a bespeckled, overweight, just kind of nobody.
Yeah.
He's not some sort of brave, debonair, detective going out. Yeah.
I honestly spent the most time on the side, on Ridley Scott's side, thinking he was a replicant until the sequel came out. And then I was like, it just makes so much more sense for him not to be.
Yeah.
With this sequel. Love and who's the guy that replaces Tyrell in the sequel?
Jordan Catalano, Jared Leto.
Yeah, I can't think of his character's name, but it's implied he's also a replicant, right? Like his eyes do the thing when he shines them, right? Like they have that look to them.
Yeah, it's left, I think, pretty far open, but yeah, I would agree that there's certainly. Is he one of Tyrell's creations? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and so, I think that all of that is proof that Harrison Ford is not, because that thing has not aged, like Jared Leto's thing has not aged in the same way that Harrison Ford has.
And Wallace. Sorry, I had to look it up. Wallace. Oh, yeah, Wallace. It's Wallace Corporation.
Wallace Corp, yeah. And Love is just like pure perfection. Oh. Yeah, right?
She is so great. That actress is so great in that role.
Yeah. So I'm sure that through our organic conversation, we'll kind of really tap into the plot of the sequel too, in the first one. And I don't mean to jump into the sequel either, but it just.
And I think it's pretty kind of fluid between the two. Is good.
Yeah, I just really like how there's this flow of conflict between the two movies, and how like it's. And I will make the argument that in the end, it's just showing that it's a cyclical nature, that it will always be this way, where it's like the first one is like humans versus replicants, and then the second one is like replicants versus humans. But they also, in the sequel, the love interest between the virtual reality wife and that is just absolutely heartbreaking. That is that whole thread through the movie is spectacular in my opinion.
Isn't
and
it?
How and the replicants look down on this thing, this artificial life, because it's even more artificial than they are because it's not tangible. So that really, I think, was it's just so spectacular how it really continues that struggle, that just one right to it's like this flow of conflict between the two of them.
Yeah. Dave, so I think when we had talked about Blade Runner, you had mentioned these weren't maybe necessarily right up your alley, or maybe kind of science fiction isn't your thing 100%. So I'm curious, what was your exposure to Blade Runner at all? Or, because I think, Palmer, you had seen it before or had enjoyed it. It's a little more kind of up our alley. And so coming from a different perspective where maybe the theming isn't 100% your interest, or, how does a movie like this reach you, or what are the themes that stick out to you?
I think that I'm trying to remember. I feel like I first watched it when I was living in Cleveland Heights, so it would have been at least 9 to 10 years ago, and I would have been, I don't know, in my early 30s, I guess, by the time I actually finally saw it, I think. And I think I watched the theatrical cut first. I want to say that I got, I probably did get, because the final cut came out in 2007. Is that right?
I think so.
I think. Yeah, so I think I probably got, what I remember is getting something like a double disc thing from the library in Cleveland Heights. It was like a walking distance. And so because I remember watching both versions. And I can't recall what pushed me over the edge to take that leap. I think to some extent it was just the reputation of it as this, super influential movie. And I'm curious about versions of things, how kind of the edit can make a difference, and the stories behind movies like that. I honestly think it was a combination of that, and just there was this period where, because the library was so close to me, like a 5-7 minute walk, and they had a great selection at this library. The bride and I would just go there, and I would grab things off the shelf in a kind of a non-calculated way that's very generally uncharacteristic for me of my media consumption. And so I think I just picked it up in that kind of curious way, and sat and watched it, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. And I'm not sure I can speak as well to the themes, at least not in this moment. But that actually was one of the questions I wanted to ask you, just because I think of you as, I think I have a misconception about maybe how much media you saw up until what point in your life. And so when you said that I saw, what was the Val Kilmer, Michael Douglas movie, Ghost in the Darkness or whatever, in a theater, I'm like, whoa, you were watching movies in the theater then? So, but I'm curious because, it's less, well, I'm always just interested in why people are passionate about something. So I hope I kind of gave you a sense of where I came at this from, more of a sense of curiosity for me and in the film legend of Blade Runner than anything it's about. But
I mean, a lot of anybody who does sci-fi to any degree will talk about the impact that movie had on them. I mean, as far as set design, and Ridley Scott is really kind of dismissive of it almost. He just says, well, I came from this background of filming commercials, and we had this obviously one long set in a back lot of Warner Brothers, I think is where it was. But he's like, we would just film a corner of the set, and then we'd just turn a bunch of shit upside down and paint it a different color.
Yeah.
And film the next scene. But to the human eye, it all looks distinct, right? And so the thing that I just really loved about it, or that stuck with me even after not necessarily loving it the first time, was just this very interesting feel of the film, starting from the first kind of, I forget if they call it Hades or something, of that shot of the car coming in over LA.
Just like a hellscape kind of modern, like a city, but like a hellscape of a city. I've seen that shot a lot. I've seen it in The Crow. It looked just the same, but that was the first. Yeah. That was like that shot is like the fucking ship in Star Wars, the one that just keeps going forever.
Oh yeah.
It is so iconic and unprecedented. And when I started to rewatch it the other day, it was a little bit breathtaking to me. I was just like, holy shit. And I was just remembering like all the movies I'd seen it in, and they hold on it for so long, and they really take your time. Because I started to watch it, and then like a few minutes in, I decided, oh, I wouldn't get through it all tonight, so I'll start. Anyway, but then the next day I came back to it, and my thought was like, I just got through that opening scene, and that was true. But I was also 5 minutes into the movie. Yeah. Literally. So I was like, but it works, man. That sets a real tone, and it sets the world in motion that is immersive.
That's the thing.
Yeah,
exactly. Because you feel like, Ridley Scott had talked about initially where it was all going to be indoors, and less kind of setting the framework for the entire world. And then Ridley, wanted to build, of course, the Tyrell Corporation, Ziggurat, whatever those are called, pyramid thing. Ziggurat, is that the name of them? But the huge building, and then of course the hellscape shot, and then filling a lot of the set at night gave them a lot of ability to not worry about California mountains in the background, because it's dark, so you can't see anything back there. And they were able to do a little more outdoor stuff and set the feel of the film. And that's the interesting thing to me, because it allows your imagination to run and build all, well, there's this gigantic city. What kind of other stuff is going on? And who are all these other characters? And obviously Roy Batty's speech at the end talking about, I've seen things that, I've seen off of Orion's belt and the Tannhauser Gate. It's like a couple sentences, but now there's this huge world of all these off-world colonies, and there's just this ability to, and it gives your ability for your mind to run. They don't show you any of those things, and they don't show you a lot of things, but you have the ability, based on what they did show you, to visualize this world of the planet Earth, but then, where else have we gone, and what else have we done, and what else is happening in all these battles and mining, and, it just opens that up and gives you freedom to dream and conceptualize. And I just think Ridley Scott, in his set design and all of that, allows, because of the detail, you to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that I was looking for confirmation of this, but I think that was his first background, was as a set designer or something.
Oh,
so
okay.
Nice.
Or some sort of designer. Anyway, but yeah, it says he began his career as a television designer and director before moving into advertising and then filmmaking. But
I mean, he's had a couple things since Blade Runner, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What has Ridley Scott done in the last 30 years? Am I right?
Well, I mean, some of it has been less good than others if you look at some of this, but he was on a real roll back then. Another like a little coincidence I saw in trying to find that detail was that coming into Blade Runner, like, of course, he'd done Alien, which was game changing, and something I didn't know or had forgotten was this whole thing, of him. I don't know if it was him or who on the production basically made the decision to just change Ripley to cast Ripley as a female, but not change anything. And so all of the strength, so you just weren't used to seeing women in that kind of a context, but partially it was because they just didn't pay any attention to the fact that it was a woman it wasn't meant to be. So it was written as a man, suddenly cast as a woman, and set forth this kind of template for like your
That's
badass,
awesome.
like, your Furiosas, your Sarah Connor, all that kind of. The precedent is set there. Anyway, so he had made Alien, which is unbelievable. I only saw Alien for the first time in the last 3 years at the Alamo Drafthouse. I saw a double feature of Alien and Aliens, And
that's
he was great.
Yeah.
It was
real quick as an aside, so we talk about Star Wars kind of being somewhat foundational in this view of science fiction being like everything is shit of science fiction, right? Like things are beat up and like stuff is just like not good. And obviously Ridley Scott built on that. And then Blade Runner is the same thing. And like, hey, the future isn't shiny and round and like it's now, but terrible.
Grimy.
Even more terrible than now is. Yeah, it's like a real lived in place. So sorry.
All of
absolutely.
our problems will still be there, and all of these other terrible things.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, right.
but we will still have
New
all
problems.
of our problems too. So.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
but like, to like Ridley really, I think, I'm not saying you get that from Star Wars, but obviously with Alien was very much that way.
Mhm.
Industrial,
But they're essentially, he describes that crew as essentially space truckers.
Right, right.
So they're like blue collar workers of the future. So it and Deckard is the same way. Is it Deckard with a D
Deckard,
or
yeah,
with a D at the end? So it's Deckard is the same thing. He's like this out of work Blade Runner, right? Who's done. He thought, he wants to be done with it. He just wants to like eat his noodles and be in peace.
I think he knows he's probably not that great at it.
Yeah, exactly.
I love how that dude he gets the noodles from where like it seems as though he couldn't understand them or there was this language barrier. And I think I was reading this correctly. And then at the end of the scene, somebody else when they come in to like haul him off, you realize that the English that the guy that's serving him the noodles understands English perfectly because he speaks it or something. Where it's just like giving him a hard time. Yeah. I don't know. It was delightful. I was really charmed by. Awesome. I just know it's more an understated thing that Harrison Ford is doing in it compared to some of the broader things of the Indiana Jones stuff. But I was riveted by him. I was just like this. I forget. I've only seen him as an older guy recently, and he's always fun to see. But man, the little bit I saw, like the half of the movie I saw, I was just like, this guy's a treasure,
Yeah.
And he's doing such great work.
The faces that he makes. And, he talked about on some of the press junkets initially afterwards that he wasn't maybe the most happy with the movie. He kind of felt like, I just stood around like it was a detective movie. I didn't do any detecting.
Right.
Like I just kind of, but even he in an interview in this, that the interview in the book was done prior to 2049, talks about how he was still young in his career to some degree, and he didn't necessarily see the vision that Ridley Scott had even when he's done. And it reminded me of Tom Hardy having to publicly apologize to George Miller. In their press junket and say, George, I'm sorry, I couldn't see it. And that's what this is to some degree. Harrison is, I think, maybe a little too proud to say it quite like Tom Hardy did, in a different generation of actor for sure. But basically, in a roundabout way, saying we just couldn't necessarily see the vision that Ridley had for the movie.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because those guys, they knew Harrison Ford had done a lot of pretty big shit, seen some stuff go down, and it's difficult. I mean, that's actually a little bit with, not to derail it or get into it, but some of the challenge at my work involving film production is coming with some people coming in and be like wanting to do things in an entirely different way.
Sure.
The way that our experience has shown this is not going anywhere but into the rocks, Yeah. And so we're resistant to it because of that, and because of their track record. But whatever. But things don't change unless you get somebody with a vision that works out. And goddamn, did this work out? The little tidbit I wanted to tell you that I found was looking for something else that I didn't know was that he came to Blade Runner after Alien, so he had that under his belt to be like, look, I know how to do this, so maybe you should listen to me. But it says after a year working on the film adaptation of Dune and following the sudden death of his brother Frank, Scott signed on to direct the Blade Runner. And it's funny because he went from, and then Dune was ultimately directed by David Lynch, but the Denis, I don't know, is it Denis Villeneuve? Is that how you say it?
It's Denis, I think.
Denis. Okay.
He's a French director.
Yeah, so he's going from Blade Runner 2049 to having directed the new Dune.
Yeah.
That's just a funny coincidence.
It's good. Like if you get a chance to watch Denis talk about Blade Runner, it's like me talking, or any fan talking about Blade Runner and just talking about the impact. I mean, and if you watch any of his others, like Arrival or some of his other sci-fi stuff, you feel it right away. Like there's no doubt that sort of sci-fi, that what we would now call probably hard sci-fi. Blade Runner is hard sci-fi. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not Star Wars, right? Sci-fi. It's clunky. You know, there's no.
It's not for mass consumption.
Yeah, there's no lasers or space wizards. You know, it's just it gets there, but it's kind of the car's kind of banging into the ground as it makes it across the finish line. You can see like he sees that vision as well.
Do you think, like, after the discussion on Ridley Scott's vision and how epic it was and how well he was able to achieve it on this film, do you feel that the director of 2049, and I won't even attempt to butcher his name, Villeneuve, is that right?
Yeah, yep. Denis Villeneuve.
Do you feel like he was able to tap into that? And you said he was able to grab that same vision. Yeah. I think I personally think that it feels like a Ridley Scott movie when you watch it. Like, I feel like it just like continued on from that. He just really said it well in that same universe. He did a great job.
Yeah, I guess like when I saw it in the theater on IMAX, because I was just so excited for it, and it lived up to my expectations for sure. But there's the scene, the first time in the movie where I was like, okay, this is where I feel like it's going to go the way I think. Not the story, but just the feel of the movie is when he's going to search at the orphanage. That's just basically an abandoned trash dump in San Diego, which is basically a trash heap. And his car gets shot down and he lands there and he gets out of it. And all those people are coming after Gosling's character, Kay. And he pulls that gun out, and just this sound, it wasn't the scene necessarily, but in the theater, in the IMAX theater, the sound of that gun was enough to just be like, I remember Rick Deckard's gun sound, and it just powerful. I mean, they obviously it's different, but it's the same. And you're just kind of like, he gets kind of all of the nuances that make Blade Runner what it is, and why people like that movie is because of how well thought out and well done the small things are, and just the impact that you feel when Kay's character starts taking dudes out and the scene progresses. But I just remember almost have to cover my ears just because of like how loud it was, and be like, oh yeah, well, here we are.
Yeah. Yep. That sound design in that scene is very impactful. That's a great, that whole scene, him going down, because he said like drive the car into the ground, and I was like, that happens in 2049. He drives the car right into the ground, and that's that scene. You're right. That sound is iconic.
You can go on. I mean, I can go on and on, certainly, just about, just not shying away at all from this conflict of even Kay, how he views himself is different than how the other androids view themselves, and how he views them is different than how they view him. And you can see that there's a little bit of difference, when you start having androids retire other androids, and just how the humans, of course, view him in various times. I think the scene too, the other scene that really made me just recognize that I was in a Blade Runner movie was their version of kind of the Hellscape, where he's returning from the conflict at the protein plant, and he's in the car flying back to the police station, and it's just endless miles, hundreds of miles of, just nothing, apartment buildings and advertisements. And you're just like, well, it's not necessarily a hellscape as in like industrial, but it's a hellscape, right? It's all of these people are just existing, and this is their existence in this coastal city that has to have a giant wall built because ocean levels are rising, and it's not good.
The 2-second shower, where they're like 99% pure water,
and
it just like splashes him. That's all the shower he gets. And he's like filthy and disgusting still afterwards. You're right. It is a hard science fiction. I think that is a good description of it. It has a huge cult following, and I think that's because it just takes a certain kind of person to really enjoy it. Not even appreciate it, just enjoy it, So,
yeah.
But
the thing I was going to tell you before, or what your question before, Twinkie, about like what drew me to her with themes or stuff. I think I'm not interested in science fiction as a rule, but I like certain science fiction that is kind of just the backdrop against which things can be heightened and talked about in a different way. So just a more simple version of it is something like Highlander. I like the Highlander first film in the TV series, but the reason I like it is because of what some of that idea is, like certain people are immortal and they can only die unless they die a violent death. They'll only ever even find out that they're immortals if they die a violent death. And then thereafter, they can only die if their heads are cut off, and they're all trying to race to be the last one on Earth. Anyway, so it's a simple premise though but then it's all dealt with like, what is it like if you live forever and people around you die and the people you fall in love with like grow old and die? And so that allows for those things to be dealt with in an interesting way. And so this is a science fiction movie that, there's a lot of cool shit, but the cool shit is not just decoration in either of these. They're very sort of cerebral, and they have action in them and stuff, but there's a lot of substance to ideas that they're trying to move through. And then I feel that the science fiction is sort of the setting, the genre stuff is kind of, well, it's not secondary. It elevates the things that they're trying to explore. And I think that is very appealing and satisfying. Even when I don't always know what's going on, I know somebody's up to something, and then it'll become more clear if I give my attention to it. And you can sense that attention to detail, but you can also sense the intentionality behind particularly the first one.
And I think to really piggyback on that, I think the film has potential for that to happen, right? I think like Palmer's question was, did Denis like salvage the corpse of Blade Runner, but then just go in a completely different direction? And there's potential for that, even in the first kind of third of the movie. But then you get to Vegas, and he just goes hardcore right into the Blade Runner questions, right? Because you meet Ford's character, you meet Deckard again, which is just the soul of this movie. As much as talk about how Rutger Hauer is probably my favorite part of Blade Runner, Harrison Ford and Ryan Gosling is great. Don't get me wrong. Just an absolute gem. But Ford is the soul of this because, right when they first meet, Kay's hitting him with questions, right? Where are you? Why'd you leave him? Blah, 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 blah. And he just kind of quietly takes it. And then he says, sometimes if you love someone, you have to leave. Or, I forget the exact line, but basically they were being hunted and he needed to draw everybody off. Which, again, people could argue if you were in Ridley Scott's camp that why would Deckard be hunted if he wasn't a replicant? But anyway, all that being said, you get that soul of the movie with Deckard, again, giving this picture of Rachel and their child and contrasting that with what Wallace is doing, right? this is all just an experiment. This is all just if I can do this, think of what I can do. I can play God, as evidenced by that just almost traumatic scene of him murdering that woman, which was really hard for me to watch. But, just contrasting that with his just completely almost just visceral clarity in trying to get the ability to birth android babies at whatever cost.
I can't remember. Why does he want to do that? Why is that evolution important to him?
Well, I think it basically can eliminate the need for human childbirth. And it's basically an assembly, and it's a self-perpetuating assembly line. Doesn't have to actually create anything anymore. I don't know if they come out and say exactly like this is what he's trying to do, but I think it even makes it worse because it's more a feather in the cap. It's more a claim than it is any sort of like, well, you're just cycling through these androids to try to find the right combination of genetic DNA that will allow them to give birth, and just almost at any cost, right? There's nothing he won't do to make it happen.
Yeah. Do you think that this starts getting into some of the philosophy of the films that I am interested in. What do you think his means is, like his ultimate goal? If he can get this, is it so that he can make enough to perpetuate man to the stars and beyond?
That's what his stated goal is, I think.
Yeah. I personally think, though, that goal does not include mankind. I take the implication very heavily that he is a replicant himself. In that scrapped storyline of Tyrell being a replicant for another Tyrell that was in cryogenic, like that helps support that. Like maybe Jared Leto was a contingency for Tyrell being killed, like that got put into place for this to continue on, and this was the lost piece that he's looking for. But I really think that it is to eliminate the need to have to manufacture all of these replicants, for sure.
But because now you can send 20 androids to a colony, right, and then they can self-perpetuate
and eliminate the need for humans, I think, from the equation. I think that's and Love is a great one. That's where I got a lot of the impression was from Love's reactions and actions throughout the movie, like constantly accusing Jenny of like being afraid of progress and not wanting, I think that just helps solidify that, like, I don't think the humans were meant to like continue into that perpetuation to the stars that he's trying to get,
Yeah,
so.
It's great. It is that question of like who's more human,
right?
And they continually ask that, and you can ask that in our world today for sure, 100%. When we make some decisions, are those human decisions, or are we making them for some other like less than human reason?
Right.
And in this case, you can put these replicants there and say, okay, now ask the same question, but from a different perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting. It seems like we come back to like with some of the reasoning behind why we don't think why Deckard might not be a replicant is because of his so many imperfections. That it's like the fallibility is what defines his humanity, and that reminds me of like what people say when like about like we all make mistakes, we're all human. You ever heard that phrase?
Yeah, it is interesting. Or like if he was a replicant, for example, would he have made the decision? Would he have had the ability to make the decision to leave Rachel in order to ensure her safety? Because it's counterintuitive, right? Because Kay doesn't understand it. Kay says, "Why did you leave her? Why did you abandon them?" Right? That's all. Kay, in that circumstance, would have died, and you can argue he does die at the end of this to facilitate safety, and to facilitate his mission. Whereas Deckard, of course, sees it differently. He thinks that he can draw off and he went in and showed them how to make the birth records different. And I forget, there was a couple things he did to throw off the scent of the Wallace Corporation, or maybe even Tyrell Corporation back then. I can't remember. But either way, making decisions that aren't necessarily logical or, machine logical.
Like they, with the memories and stuff, right? They kind of, if they do want someone to do something, like maybe this is really me talking as a form of some sort of question or confirmation, but like they know these are emotionally driven, the replicants are emotionally driven or whatever, so they kind of create the memories such that would move them toward the path that they want them to take. Someone wants them to take. So they kind of wanted Kay to think he was a certain person that he wasn't, in order to have him pursue things. And if that's the case, again, it would be that kind of true unpredictability of a real human being, that their motivations are not always consistent, their actions are not always consistent with their desires, and those type of imperfections, where people don't act in their self-interest, and they do something that no one could like try to orchestrate. People are manipulated all the time. But,
sure.
And a lot of times that really works. And, but sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes it doesn't because of really weird things that you could never predict. Am I getting that kind of right though, that they were trying to program the memories for kind of a means as to an end, or?
But I think though, yes, I think that memory was planted to try to elicit a certain reaction. But I got the impression when he interviews her earlier in the movie, before he knows who she is, I really got the impression that she had implanted that memory multiple times in the hopes that, so to your argument, were those memories there to steer them and make them do that? I think that only works to a certain extent, and that there is still some level of free will involved there, because he was the first one that she planted that memory in, that led to all of those, that all the pieces fell into place.
Yeah, because what we find out later, of course, is that he's reliving her she's taking and putting riffs on her own life memories into replicants, because Wallace found out that they respond better, differently, whatever, when it's a realistic memory, when it not some sort of like supernatural thing that if it happened to somebody else, then they'll react better, but it's just more authentic because she experienced it, even though she's, could argue 50-50, right? She's part replicant, part human. She has the ability to understand how those things maybe do affect people better, which is why she gets the job, right? To create memories for androids.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was really interesting to me. When we got to the end, I'm like, oh yeah, we just basically relived her childhood. I get it.
Right.
The time in the orphanage, all of those things. Really interesting.
It's the Bane switch from the last Christopher Nolan Batman movie. It's the whole time you think that you're the child trying to escape from that prison is Bane, when in reality it's what was her name?
Yeah, I know you're talking about.
Yeah.
Rachel. I think her name is Rachel also. Yeah. Or no,
Oh,
it wasn't. Sorry. No, the Katie Holmes character is Rachel.
Yeah.
The Ra's al Ghul's daughter.
Yeah, that same thing. Like you are watching this memory, and everybody's head is shaved, and they're all dirty, and they're kids, of course, and so they all look kind of androgynous a little bit, and you are buying the ruse just like he is the entire time.
Yeah.
So
well, and to me, there's almost like this. It's almost like a little bit of a Pinocchio feel to me sometimes with him, in the sense that he just wants to be a real boy. Mm-hmm. He wants to believe it so much, just like we almost, to the point where I want to believe it.
Yeah.
And then he's going to try to do all these things that, not in the Pinocchio sense of turn into a real boy, but find out he's a real boy. And his desire just to be loved, of course, and that whole, idea that Palmer talks about with Ana de Armas's character. So many different threads there.
Do you think so? The idea of him being that child, this child, prodigal child, one could argue, mm-hmm. is planted by her. She's the one that says, "This is you." She shows her, pulls the toy out. I
forgot. Yeah, because she does kind of reinforce it at various times.
Yeah, and so is his desire really fueled by his need for that love to be genuine? Because if she thinks I'm special and I actually am special, then maybe she genuinely loves me and isn't programmed to love me. Because that also gets addressed a couple times where she's like, "Oh, I see you're one of our customers as well, and do you enjoy our product?" And she's very realistic. And earlier in the rain, she says something that's very, very, very sentimental, and he's like, "You don't have to say that,"
right?
And I wondered if his need for this to be true is if that would validate, because he wants that love that he feels for that AI to be more than a program. He wants it to be genuine.
Like that scene at the end, where it's the huge version of her and he's walking back, after all the shit's gone down, he just stops and looks at her. It was just
it's so heartbreaking.
Yeah. This thing I can't have, even though I really want it.
And I really do feel that that's another one of those ambiguous things that you are left to question is, did she genuinely? There are moments where you believe it's more than programming, or is the program just that good?
Yeah.
Yeah. That whole thread, that whole love story between those two is my favorite part of the whole sequel. Sorry.
Nice. I could see that. There's a lot of interesting themes in there for sure.
Yeah, I was wondering, because this, again, I'm not sure if I'm getting this right, but so in the first one with the Nexus 6, their shortened lifespan is because of the understanding that they will kind of get a consciousness of their own after that time, and so it's to kind of phase them out.
Right. They'll become volatile.
Yeah. And so it seems like there's a bit of a with Joy there as well, that she's kind of evolving. All these things once they set them in motion, there's a certain amount of they become less controllable, and they kind of get their own, I guess, their own desires beyond perhaps what they were intended, or I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. If they become self-actualized and realize that they're just designed for a purpose, then they'll become, you can't control them. Whereas the hope was with memories. Well, now I have a childhood, and I love these people, and I have this. I have a place in the world. I belong. Which is funny because we all
die on this other planet.
Yeah,
go fight this war on another planet. That's what my purpose is, because of all these memories.
Because we're all trying to find places to belong, or at least at certain pieces of our life. We're trying to find places to belong.
Yeah, I think we're all trying. I mean, maybe not all consciously, but I do think one of the goals of growing up and getting older and having your life get better as you do that is to self-actualize, so that you're not just following somebody else's script that harms you in some way, or learn the ways that you're harming yourself and change and all that. So maybe, I mean, this is like, you don't get this in your everyday, you don't get this in schlocky science fiction, this type of like, no. I wouldn't have, so that's, I think speaks to like the really,
so from
deep
like
wells.
A technical perspective, I was curious, Dave, like, so Roger Deakins wins an Oscar for cinematography for 2049. And I was curious, like just from like a technical perspective of the movie, does that ring true to you? Do you feel that as far as, frame to frame or shot to shot, does that jive with you or?
I mean, it's definitely breathtaking, and I like that sort of every frame a painting type thing. Definitely, certainly applies. I have to cop to like I don't. My understanding of cinematography is pretty limited. I literally was like doing this for almost 20 years, semi-professionally at least to some extent, before I locked in to the really key component of like what I think of as this triangle. So if I'm the subject and the camera is like this hand, then the strongest source of light ought to be over here to get the look that we're all used to. Like this kind of really basic shit took me a long time to understand. And now that I do, I see it everywhere. I was like, well, that's just kind of it, that one simple premise. So when it gets far beyond that, I don't actually, I kind of understand some of the concerns, but it's so far outside of my realm of true understanding for me to appreciate it really well. I have a good friend who does he's like a gaffer, or like he's on these kind of lighting teams and stuff like that for Food Network shows, like big time shows, and he's part of this crew that moves around and works on them. And I was working on something with him a few years ago in this corner, and I was setting up one of my lights, with this principle that I tried to articulate just now, this whole 10 and 2 hands on the wheel type triangle vibe. And anyway, I'm setting up the light. I'm like, there's this kind of thing where this element, like, it's like an umbrella. Like you put an umbrella and you get it to a certain point, it clicks into place, open. And this is kind of like that. And he moved it to a certain place before it even clicked, and he didn't do it. I was just kind of like, what's he doing? And I was kind of moved to do it to, like, in my estimation, finish setting up the light as it should be set up. And I kind of paused and realized I was kind of interfering with his work. I was like, you do this for a living, huh? And so I should maybe let you do that. But the other point too is then I asked him, it's like, well, when you watch these kind of shows, knowing the intricacies of how all this is achieved, and do you get really distracted, like watching television about the lighting of this, that, the other? And he's like, I only ever really notice it at all if something's really wrong. And so I think for me, it's a little bit like that too. It's like most of the time, these type of things just wash over me and I can accept them for what they are. But I'll notice and marvel and be like, that's amazing. And I'll rarely think of what I think it would have taken to achieve it. But man, what I always notice is like when something seems off.
Yeah.
So this type of immaculate artistry, my mouth is just open.
It's just insane to me how good they can make some of that stuff look, right? Like,
yeah.
And then you even like talked, I think watching some of the behind the scenes stuff for 2049, talked about like some of the effects, and it's literally like $8 LEDs and like some sort of like little strobing thing. They just, it's really basic stuff, but it's how they can transfer their vision to the screen, right? And just capture it that way.
Yep.
That's they see it before it's ever on a screen and it's ever CGI'd or whatever. Like that's the artistry of it, not the $10 in parts and the 2 hours of setup or whatever, that's part of it. That's part of the process. Obviously you need the $150 million budget or whatever to make it happen.
Yeah. And a lot of those things are just tools, and it's the way it's the vision behind those things and people wisely using tools. So actually for me, the difference with those two movies is one is pre-CGI And so like watching Blade Runner, not 2049, I'm able to look at it and be like, oh, okay, they in the Hellscape thing at the beginning, like that's probably a model, and yeah, it's at night, so you don't see all this other stuff, and those explosions were probably filmed separately and matted on, and there's a motion controlled camera, all this. Like I can kind of process that. But for me, once you're involving CGI, I can't fathom that. Like I actually have I can't work in 3 dimensions in graphical space. Like I've tried it a bunch of times. I've taken courses, because so much of what you see on TV, like graphics and the way they move around and 3-dimensionally interact with, I'm like, I should be able to do that. I can do every other job in some facet for my job list when you see in a thing. I mean, I couldn't cater something really, but you know what I mean? But like, I can't seem to do that. And then the animation that involves, like my brain just does not compute. So the artistry that involved there is so beyond me that it's truly another level.
Again, to Palmer's point that I found really moving and just heartbreaking at the same time is where the AI love interest brings in, well, you think she's just a prostitute, but turns out to be something a little bit more later in the movie, but brings her in. And the way that they didn't take me out of it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
the way they had to execute that CGI in order to not make it too perfect, make it seem just janky enough, you know, to where you recognize both of the performance. That to me is just mind blowing. How you do that and make that feel the way that I felt afterwards is just a real, from the actors to the storyboarding to get it to that point, to executing the CGI of the overlay. And I mean,
knowing how much to show and all that. Yeah, it's all the artistry behind. I mean, obviously there is artistry involved in rendering those things, but the things that make it tick are all the decisions made leading up to that, to how much you do the interplay and to make you feel what they're manipulating us just like the replicants.
Yeah, they are.
But I'm enjoying it.
I need a light to shine on my eyes right now. So
Yeah. Let's see your serial number.
Yeah.
How about that fight at the beginning in that first opening?
Oh, I wanted to talk about that because I'm on the fence, because you got Dave Bautista again. And I thought maybe speaking to what you mentioned a few shows ago, Palmer, about him wanting to play kind of average people, he kind of is getting to do that here.
Mm-hmm.
But he's still a hulk of a man, and so you get little Ryan Gosling walking in. And then he physically gets the better of him, and I was struggling with that. But at the same time, I'm like, he's repeatedly hitting him in the throat. I was like, that would probably immobilize. I don't know. How did that read for you guys?
I just kind of read it as just an advanced. It's the newer model. Yeah, he's quicker. He's smarter. He's my iPhone now is way better than my old iPhone, even though they're the same size, right? Or maybe mine's a little smaller now, right? So I guess that's how I viewed it, as showing how K is just superior.
But we didn't know he was a replicant at that point. At least I didn't. I thought he was just a dude. So it's like just a dude showing up and beating up Dave Bautista. I'm like, I don't know.
It's meant to reveal that.
Fight, he's like, even Dave Bautista says that at one point, like, how does it feel like hunting your own kind? Or doesn't he say that?
Yeah, the scene is meant to reveal that, at least in my viewing, that Gosling is just a newer version.
You're supposed to 100% be asking that question, Dave.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Should Ryan Gosling beat this guy? And that's the reveal, is that he asks him, how can you hunt your own kind?
Right. And I forgot that the it's kind of flipped in this one, whereas in Blade Runner, the Harrison Ford character, we question sort of later as whether or not he's a replicant. Whereas in this one, it's set up from the beginning by that he is one. Yeah. And for a minute, we question that he's not. Right?
It's even kind of on the flight there.
Exactly.
He puts it on auto mode. Yeah. He puts the flying car in auto and almost kind of like shuts down. Yeah. Goes to sleep. Yep. And then, they're hinting at it the whole time that he's a machine doing machine-like work.
That's right. Yeah, I forgot. I just got mixed up.
And I think that Love is another great example of like the power and strength and like a killing ability when she assassinates that coroner. Just like
one.
Like, here's my paper. Like just like one quick jab right to the back of the neck, and then that guy he's done. Like,
yeah, poor David Dalmatian. Man, I love that guy.
He plays such a great creeper.
He does. That's a great word for it.
Yeah.
Hey, come out to wherever we're filming this thing. I'm going to fly you 15 hours across the world for this role where you get destroyed in 1 minute and 40 seconds on screen.
It's so crazy. Oh, man. And it's like this weird quick jab right in the back of his neck. So, I totally, that opening fight is just they're right next to a wall, like an opening in the wall, but it's like, no, we're going through this wall right here, like, is that fantastic?
No, I agree. That's just, there's a lot of.
You think he ate the soup afterwards? You think he tried the garlic soup?
Maybe.
I think he did.
Yeah,
I bet he did.
For sure.
I think so I think my take on it is that memory was even impacting and making him a little unique even prior to this whole wild goose chase going off.
Yeah, because he has a relationship with Robin. I can't remember anybody's name today. Must be more tired than I think. But you can tell they have an established relationship.
Right. What do you think of the other one the contrast and the assessment from the original Blade Runner to this one, where it's like the conf test, right? Like,
right.
And the original one, and then this one is the baseline test. And that first, because you see that almost right after that fight with Bautista, and you see a couple really interesting things, like he's walking through the precinct and the other officers are like just garbage, and like he just like is stoic the whole time. And that baseline is so intense, and it makes me uncomfortable.
It does.
Even
I agree.
Like a few times, like watching it just makes me uncomfortable. And so my question is, like, what do you think the contrast between those two, like the way they present those in the movies? And
yeah, it almost seems like now they've, in this new, it's been 50 years now, 30 years. Sorry. 2019 is when the first one is set. What's funny is in the book, sorry, quick aside, they changed it. It was originally going to be set in 2020, but there's something like they didn't want to have it confused with the Vision, like people to get confused with 2020 Vision. And so they changed it to 2019.
Huh.
That's what I guess these test screenings do for you. I don't know. But
that's crazy.
So I guess we would have Blade Runner 2050, but now we have 2049. And everything seems just a little more mechanized right now. And after these 30 years, they've implemented androids more into society. And now it's just more of a automated process, where the Voight Kampf test was very manual and very human intense, right? Deckard had to sit there and ask 100 questions. And now it's just a machine that you stand in the room and it you have to get the read back, and it's testing their body response and their eye movements, and it's doing it all automated because there's so many of these androids now, and it's a quick way to get through it, right? It's not and
they should stay on. That's why it's called baseline. There should not be an emotional response, whereas the conf test was really to elicit an emotional response.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of testing the same thing, but you want them to stay on baseline that entire time, and it is intense.
That reminds me of my favorite Sean Young scene, Sean Young scene, or one of my favorites. I have tons of favorites. When I say that, I don't really mean that, because I just love the whole thing.
Of course,
but is when she's smoking and she says, "Mr. Deckard, are you testing whether I'm a replicant or a lesbian?"
Yeah.
I just absolutely, it's such a great, the smoke, and just the coyness in her response, and just there's so much about that I really enjoy.
So yeah, so
which is like so.
Yeah,
I know we're way past our time, but there's the scene where, of course, they bring out the replicant of Rachel, and you can just see in Deckard's face that when he's going to say that she has the wrong eye color, he knows what's going to happen. But I cried in the theater, of course, when Love shoots her, because you're just like, it's just so brutal. Wallace and his mission are just abject of emotion, and it's a straight line to the finish line. And whatever it takes, no holds barred to the end.
Because they're replicants.
And just, yeah, it's so jarring and so just like, wow. Just completely heart. I don't know. I don't have words to describe it really, just how like hard that was for me to watch that.
That's what makes me think that the AI actually was legitimately sentient, because the way that Love looks him in the eyes and knows that they actually do love each other, and then kills that AI off, and knows exactly what she's doing. It's just all malicious and calculated.
Yeah, so, calculated. That's what it is. Just devoid of anything resembling who I want to be as a person, right? Empathetic, right. Just devoid of those things. And it's I see that not to that extent, of course, but I do feel that and see that sometimes in my life where I'm not as much of those things as I'd like to be.
Right.
And it drives that home, about what it means to be human, is understanding of people and empathetic and kind and open to recognizing other people's experiences and all of those things. And this is exactly opposite of that.
Yep.
And that's 100%. So much of what Joy provides, right? Is this sort of empathy to him and this reflection that like, you're a good person and I believe in you and you're special. It's funny because I was thinking it's like this joyless, the Blade Runner 2049, my memory of it was very, and it was dirty, but like kind of sterile in terms of like people's emotions. Whereas like Harrison Ford's fun, like with the guy with the noodle guy, there's a little bit of that going. And, but yeah, this 2049 feels more cold in terms of the way people are, except for Joy. And it's like that's like a manufactured thing to allow really for people to have this controlled. Oh, and it reminds you of hearing things like about the pleasure unit of is that what the Daryl Hannah character model was?
Yeah.
But
that's true. I totally forgot. Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought I was struck to look at the cast name I was like, because I didn't remember anybody's character names. And so I don't know if I even remembered that her name was Joy, Joy, but still.
Right.
She's the only real Joy in the movie.
And it's funny how Love is exactly not that.
Yeah.
Well, she loves the mission. She loves she loves Wallace, right? And I man, it's just so good. I would also, for anybody listening, if you haven't taken the plunge, I would also recommend, there's like is it 3 or 4 little shorts?
Yeah. I think there's 4.
It's like Blade Runner, and they all have different numbers at the end to represent the years that they all take place in the history between the original Blade Runner and the second one. Those help fill in a little bit of this, also like philosophy of the universe.
They're animated shorts. What are they, 5 to 7 minutes ish?
Yeah,
or something.
They're all different media, because like there's one with Jared Leto, like it's a live action one where he
I forgot about that.
And but the one that explains the blackout, that one is animated, and that's where you like see the background where even Dave Bautista's character realizes that it's just the war that he's fighting, thinking that he's fighting this war for somebody that paid for his to be a replicant to fight it, he looks under the eye of somebody he just killed and sees they're a replicant too, and he's like, what is the point of this then if we're not fighting anybody tangible, like, so it intense, very it's like such great layers.
It's definitely not popcorn cinema like we've talked about.
No.
So
I also think that the fact that the second one does feel colder is because there's only like 2 humans that you actually everybody else is a replicant in the movie, if you want to look at it that way. Like,
sure. Yep. Some of the resistance
Robin Wright
folks,
Penn. Yeah,
she's human. Robin Wright.
Mm-hmm.
Robin Wright Penn is human,
and she's cold
Harrison
as fuck.
Ford,
yeah.
oh man, super cold, right?
Yeah.
Like, but
she totally wants to jump his bones. Am I right? You know what I'm saying?
There's that.
She really does. That is painfully awkward. That scene.
I forgot about that.
Like, because she does want like that. That's what she wants, and he's just like, well, anything else? Like, he's just like, get out of here, And then the wife thing goes off, which is always like, I'm listening to what's fucking going on, and I don't like it, Like, it's good shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad that we finally got a chance to have this conversation, because I know it is a passion. We have to do when the Furiosa prequel comes out, we'll do the Mad Max one.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I haven't rewatched Fury Road, even though I own it. I've only ever seen it once in the theater.
Oh,
I don't know why. Yeah. I don't know why that is, but because
you just do it. Whenever you're thinking to yourself, Dave, I owe myself something really good.
Yeah.
I owe myself something really nice. Just put that on, soak it in.
I appreciate that. I'm susceptible to that type of thing. I just fell into it with Goodfellas recently. This last week, where I was hearing about it just a little too much, and I kept hearing like, no matter what point you enter that movie, like you're gonna watch the whole thing. And I thought to myself, have I seen the whole thing more than once? And I was like, I don't think so, but the whole thing feels very familiar. Anyway, I was like, that was what I did I think the night I started Blade Runner, but didn't finish it. I started it, I'm like, I don't know. I was like, well, they say you can't just start Goodfellas and not go through with it. That I was trying to just like relax and treat myself something. So I tried it, and I think it did work. I was like, oh, good. There it was. So, but I'm sure that would work on Fury Roads. I'm glad you planted that in my head, because it's going to pay off.
Yeah.
In a wonderful viewing. And now I'm going to have to, you push me over the edge on that Island of Lost Souls stuff. You're a real tastemaker here. I appreciate it. Well, actually, both of you are.
Plumber.
I did the Howard the Duck, all of that stuff. I've enjoyed it all recently because of you.
Well, and now I have an excuse to revisit that stuff, and I want to watch that. I did want to watch that Val documentary anyways, but I would totally be up for discussing both of those documentaries, especially since Val Kilmer has been like my celebrity nemesis. Like,
exactly. He doesn't have to stop now. 2 things can be true. Val Kilmer can be in a rough spot right now, but he could also have been an asshole that deserves a nemesis.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fair.
Yeah.
Who also happens to look like Nick Nolte's mugshot.
Yeah. There's no. I mean, we all have been captured.
Oh no! Wait, I gotta stop.
Lives.
I do have to stop that one. Nick Nolte looks like Nick Nolte's mugshot.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to, because I know a few Blade Runner fans. Like, I remember even telling people at work, like, hey, I'm going to go watch this movie. I'm like, what do you mean? What? Yeah. You don't share this very specific passion on this very specific franchise that hardly anybody ever watched when it first came to the theater? Weird.
What are you, a nerd? Look at him. He's a nerd. We got a nerd here.
Yeah. What, do you want to feel good about the future?
Yeah.
Oh, hell no. We're none of that around here.
No.
Get a very clear picture of your workplace.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, just think of very much the standard American fare. Sorry, any of my coworkers who listen to this, you all know I'm not some sort of like elite, but like it's pretty straightforward. And I obviously I consume a lot of that stuff too. I'm not speaking down to anybody, but Just not a lot of. I went and watched Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. They re-released it in theaters, and one of my coworkers was like, "Yeah, I'll go with you." They won't make that mistake again.
Oh, like they hadn't seen it and they took a chance?
No idea what they were walking into.
That's harsh.
Well, how
could you do that?
Even in advance, I was like, okay, so this is sci-fi, but this isn't Star Wars. This is even Star Trek. Like this is
like the seed of sci-fi. It's like sci-fi before sci-fi existed.
This is slow, hard sci-fi. Like I just want I didn't just let them walk into it blind. And even afterwards, I was like, well, could you at least see where like Lucas could have gotten an idea or two, or could you at least see where, science fiction people after seeing that would have pulled, where Alien comes from, and they capitulated on that a little bit, but other than that, they're like, what about the last act? And I was like, well,
yeah. What about the first, like the prelude? I mean, when the monkeys are like, did they look at you like, what the fuck is this now?
Yeah. Like Kubrick's gonna Kubrick. Like there's some things you just can't.
There's only like 45 minutes of actual movie, and the rest of it is all just these batshit crazy visuals.
And you're like, okay, take that shot. That shot lasted approximately 6 hours and 47 seconds, and it could have been like 18 seconds. It's just different movie making, right? It's made at a different time, and those shots last forever, and they've, I don't know. I mean, I love it.
It reminds me that movie is a bit of a precursor for the time that these Blade Runner movies take. That's the kind of the original cerebral. I mean, maybe not the original, but in terms of successful cerebral sort of philosophy heavy sci-fi popular cinema, that seems like an early. Anyway,
make no mistake, I'm a huge fan of it, and I mean, as much of it is just. I mean, people really love Kubrick. I don't necessarily I love like Dr. Strangelove and things like that, but like 2001 kind of feels like they were like threw a lot of money at him and he could kind of do whatever he wanted a little bit. I mean, it was still great, or it wasn't viewed at the time as such, but now looking back on it, you can see why, or, see where a lot of modern themes of AI and, were way ahead of his time.
But after 2001, you could not get a coworker to go see 2049.
I bet those bridges 100%. Unless it's like a Marvel movie or something with a known quantity. Yeah, nobody's going to take my opinion on movies.
I went to that re-release too. It was fantastic. Totally worth it.
It was amazing.
Your coworker is batshit crazy.
Yeah. No, I mean, he's great. It was joking to some degree. Yeah. It was joking to some degree, but at the same time, it was clear like we have different interests and we'll agree to pursue our own interests as such. So
no, this was great. I hope we gave it's a huge topic and two movies and all that. I hope we kind of scratched most of those itches. I was really, I got a lot out of it.
I think we did a good job, like we always do, of hopefully we'll spark some interest if somebody was on the fence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, if you even have a hint of enjoyment of you watched Minority Report, or you've, I don't know, whatever
Total Recall, Minority Report.
Yeah.
Are you doing like the Philip K. Dick adaptation?
Just like if you watched a recent science fiction movie, they've probably stolen something from Ridley Scott's Blade Runner.
Yeah.
In how they're handling a AI character, or and a theme
like Deus
dealing
Machina,
with,
that kind of thing. Owes a lot to to this. And actually, well, I guess it came before 2049, but
that's a really good movie too. I agree with that.
Oh man.
But yeah, so if you enjoyed any of those things, it's like anything else, right? It's going to be clunky. It's a product of its time, for sure. There's things that don't work about it that modern tastes don't necessarily accept. But once you watch it, I think you can then see its fingerprints all over modern cinema, for sure.
Yeah, I think of the two movies, like the Blade Runner original is more accessible in my mind. It just feels more friendly to folks who are not there to. I feel like that the second one is more thinky from the outset, and then it gets more exciting. Whereas I think the original Blade Runner, it takes its time in that 5-minute opening or whatever, but that's so much more of like a tone setting thing, and then it really gets into. It feels short. It's like a 2-hour-ish movie, but to me it feels like a 90-minute movie. That one moves. It kind of pulls off this magic trick of
it moves fast.
Yeah,
especially for a Ridley Scott movie, it moves fast.
But one last thing, I almost forgot. So a long time ago, I saw this person on the internet who made a Lego version of the spinner.
Wow.
Which is the flying car. Now it's not a official Lego thing at all. Sorry, it's really reflective. So I bought this and like printed out the manual, and I'm still assembling the Lego for it because buying Lego on like the secondhand resale market is ridiculously expensive. So it's still a work in progress, but it's a huge model. But once I get a chance to get the final pieces kind of assembled and have a chance to build it, I'll display it to everybody. But it looks like a very like true kind of version of it. And I'm very excited to actually, once I get all the pieces, to build it. And I think it's pretty good size too. Kind of forget now. It's been a while since I even purchased that, and kind of 12 inches long. It's a fairly big model. So
awesome.
You can see cool. My passion for Blade Runner goes into a lot of different directions.
I love it.
That's fantastic. Absolutely. Yeah.
You'll have to put it on top of that printer when you get it assembled.
Exactly.
It'd be a great prop.
My Eiffel Tower, my $2 Target Eiffel Tower.
Yeah. All right. Well, you guys really talking about it helped me kind of process it, and now I kind of appreciate it all the more. Anyway, so I really enjoyed having that opportunity to chew on it and talk it through with two guys I think who understood it better than I did. So
yeah,
that's some of what I come away with.
Yeah, it's good. It's great to hear. I mean, I think that was the general consensus of the movie too. It obviously was 2049 again, wasn't like a huge box office success. I think in fact it kind of lost money for them. And they're still doing Blade Runner things. I think they're doing some like anime on like a dedicated, I don't even know what it is, like dedicated service, and there's some comic books that they're still so they're keeping it alive, I think, in some less expensive ways, in hopes that there'll be future opportunities, and whether it's television, like live action television or live action movies, to return to it. But anytime you're dealing with science fiction at this level, it's expensive. It's an expensive proposition, to have the sets and the CGI and all of that. So we'll see. Mad Max, the future is kind of dependent on how they decide to go with it.
Yeah. So it's a shame because there is a huge universe, but they do a great job in the combined almost 5 hours between the two films that they're able to achieve. Especially if you add the 4 shorts in between the two. So
sure.
Well, it was an absolute pleasure, gentlemen. I always look forward to getting to talk and hang out and talk geek shit.
Yeah.
Nerd. All right, guys. All right. Well,
thanks.
Have a great evening, and I will talk to you guys soon. Love ya. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Really enjoy it.
Yeah. See you next time.